All right, so my name is Rachel Mateus, maiden name Rachel Skrok. It is August 11th, 2021, and I'm going to be interviewing my father for the Working Tobacco Stories Project of the Hatfield Historical Society. So, Dad, you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Skrok. I'm taking part in this recording session from Largo, Florida. And when my daughter Rachel was here a few weeks ago with her two sons, our grandkids, she let me know about this project. And I hate to say that it all came back to me like it was yesterday, but the memories were actually quite fresh. So I'm looking forward to telling my story about working tobacco in Hatfield.
All right, great.
Are we ready to start?
I think we're good. I have a couple of questions,
Okay.
and we'll just if we can flesh something out a little more, then we'll do it. All right. All right. Here we go. So first question: when did you start working in tobacco, and how old were you?
Oh, let me see. I'm going to back up a little bit and do an intro to the answer to that question. And I'm going to start with October 4th, 1956, because on that day, I had my 14th birthday while I was an 8th grade student in Sacred Heart School in Easthampton, Massachusetts. Now, 14, what's the big deal? And I didn't realize it at the time, but according to Massachusetts law, as a 14-year-old, I was now eligible to work on farms, including tobacco farms. I couldn't operate machinery, but I could work in the fields, and that is what I did. Now, Sacred Heart School was one of 3 parochial schools in Easthampton. And I went all the way from 1st grade on up through 8th. So there were 3 parochial schools that took you all the way through junior high school. Middle school wasn't really known at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finished 8th grade in the summertime, I know I must have been recruited while I was in school, probably that spring, because General Cigar reps would come around to all the schools, and we all knew friends from our neighborhood who had worked tobacco, so this was not some strange thing, and a lot of us decided that's a good way to make some money during the summertime. Ha ha ha, were we surprised? So during the summer after I finished 8th grade, but before I started high school, I and friends from my neighborhood in Easthampton knew to expect a school bus coming from Hatfield, probably rented by General Cigar from the Hatfield School Department, and they would pick us up early in the morning. I think it was about 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Make all the stops like we were going to school, but we're really going to Hatfield to the tobacco farms. And we would get there with our lunches and get off the buses and figure out what fields we were going to.
Mm-hmm. You didn't work the same field every time?
Well, actually there were several fields in the Hatfield area where the tobacco was grown. And in the center of all of this was where the barns were.
Yeah.
So as we went out to whatever field we were going to be working that day, everything that was harvested would come back to that area. Now, for those of us working in the fields, there were 2 job categories that we could sign up for. One was a picker. And these were the people who actually were going down the rows of the shade tobacco, picking off the mature leaves from the bottoms of the plant, and then getting, oh, maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 leaves to make a pad that they would drop between the plants with the stems pointing toward the row. Now the haulers would come down the row after the pickers, dragging a wire metal frame basket with canvas sides and wooden runners on the bottom. And we had a long metal wire hook with a wooden handle, and we could use that to get into the handles on each end of the basket and drag it down the row. And we would pick up the pads of tobacco leaves that the pickers had dropped there, and we would make pads of them, and we would crisscross them in the baskets with the stems pointing to the corners, and just kept going down the rows until we had a full basket. Then we would fold the canvas flaps over the tobacco and turn around and haul that basket all the way out of the row, which could be really long sometimes. Mm-hmm. And take it out to the end where it would get loaded on flatbed trucks, waiting until the trucks were done, and then they would take those baskets back to that central area, to the barns where they would be unloaded. And the teenage girls, probably the same age as us, would be working in the barns, actually sewing those tobacco leaves onto wooden slats that would then be raised up into the barns where the tobacco would hang and cure. Now, cure didn't really mean dry, because they had to be soft enough to be able to use to roll a cigar. Now, how does a 14-year-old learn this about cigars? By asking a question, right? So there are 3 components of a cigar. There is a type of tobacco that is shredded, like if you've seen cigarettes, you know what the tobacco inside a cigarette is like. Well, cigars have that in the middle, and it's called filler. And that tobacco was grown somewhere else other than in Hatfield. The next layer was a binder leaf. That was what was grown in Hatfield. And it kept the filler from getting loose. And this was all done by hand. I don't even know where it was done. And then the outside was a very fine kind of leaf with very small veins in it. And the people who learned how to roll cigars would put this wrapper on at the end and crimp the ends of the cigar, and all handmade. Mm-hmm. This is the way cigars were made back in that day. We would start in the fields when the plants were just coming up, because they were planted by seeds. Yeah. And when they were really small, all of us went into the fields, probably edging along on our knees to what they called sucker the new plants. We would make sure there was only one plant, throw away any second ones that were growing there, make sure there were no bugs on it. Mm-hmm. And once all that was done, it was really quite amazing how fast these tobacco plants would grow. Yeah. When they were getting almost tall enough to pick off the bottom leaves, that's when the cheesecloth coverings were put over the fields. Before that, we were just working in the open sun. And that extra shade also kept any bugs off the plants that might damage them. And then when the lower leaves were finally ripe, we would get the okay and the pickers would start going down. But the leaves were still so low to the ground, the pickers had to actually crawl on their knees down the rows or shuffling along on their butts if that was a little break for their knees. Pretty grueling work,
Yeah.
even if you were 14 or 15 years old.
I mean, how do you prepare for that as a 14-year-old? What are you like? What are you wearing? What did you eat for breakfast before?
Yeah, well, you ate as much breakfast as you could. And we were going to work 8-hour days
Mm-hmm.
with breaks at certain times during the morning, and then a lunch break, and then an afternoon session with breaks, and then finish. We were working 8-hour days. And when you've never done anything like that before, and now it's the heart of summer,
Yeah.
very hot, very humid. And I know some didn't make it because it was just too tough.
Too much.
But as we went along, we got used to it. And so you wore your oldest clothes. I think I had a couple of one of my uncle's old Navy white hats that would just fold down. So it was like a bucket over your head, because when the tobacco got high, brushing against it, the juice would get everything brown and sticky and gummy. It was pretty evil.
Was this your first job?
Yeah, it sure was. See, Massachusetts would not allow you to do anything except farm work until you were 16.
But you didn't like walk dogs or deliver papers or anything. This was it.
Yeah, but there wasn't too much work like that was available that you could count on for the entire summer. Now, everybody got dirty.
Yeah.
Everybody got dirty. Even the girls who were working the barns, because they were handling the tobacco. We all looked like ragamuffins when we finished the day, and we were getting ready, waiting for the bus to come get us and take us home. Now, clothes were washed probably, well, whenever your parents felt like doing them.
Same, nothing's changed.
Yeah, but they were so dirty, and you couldn't just wear them the next day because they were all stuck together. And after a couple times, they never really got clean. And I would say, as the workers during the work week, I'm not sure that we ever got really clean. Now, in my neighborhood in Easthampton, we were very close. We were just cross lots walking distance to the playground at Parsons Street Elementary School. And in the summer, Parsons Street School became like a playground for kids of all ages. Mm-hmm. They had ping pong tables out there. There was a baseball diamond where you could do pickup baseball games. Inside in the basement, which was always nice and cool compared to outside, there were board games that you could play and other stuff. And they actually had a small swimming pool out back there. And it probably seemed pretty big for the little kids that were going in there, but it was all concrete, rough concrete.
Yeah.
No tile or anything in it. And it was filled every day. In the morning, they would put fresh water in it because it got pretty dirty.
Untreated water, just
cold
water.
Oh yeah, cold water. And you went in because it was so hot, it felt good. Now, there were little kids in there that weren't necessarily completely toilet trained. Now, when we got home from working tobacco, the pool and the playground were closed, and there was a chain link fence around the pool and a padlock on it. But me and a couple of the other kids from the neighborhood in our tobacco clothes would go over there, and we would climb the chain link fence with a towel and a bar of soap to wash up in the water that was draining and I guess it looked like mud by the time we left. Uh, and I wouldn't say we were clean, so we were cleanish,
Less dirty.
less dirty, yeah. And you didn't struggle with it because you knew you were going to do the same thing the next day.
So, okay, so you said, it was hot, you had tools. Did you worry about safety? Like, do you remember accidents happening, or did you ever get hurt?
No, I don't think we did. I think one of the most dangerous jobs was not in the fields where we were, unless you were careless about watching where you're going and stepped in front of a tractor or one of the flatbed trucks. I don't think anyone did that. One of the most dangerous jobs was in the barns. The climbers who had to take the tobacco way up at the peak of the roof and start hanging it there. Now, I remember that General Cigar, which is the company that we actually worked for, in addition to the kids who worked in the field, every year would bring in a crew of workers from Puerto Rico, and they would put them up in the dormitories at UMass. So they were there for only until the university students were coming back to school. But those guys, and they were all men who came up for the summer from Puerto Rico, did a lot of the really hard work and kind of the dangerous stuff. I don't know that anyone was ever hurt because we never heard about it, but there were probably injuries.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Do you remember anyone playing pranks or getting into trouble? Like what might have been
Happened all the time. Happened all the time.
All the time?
Yeah. Hiding someone's lunch was a common trick, And when they really, really looked hungry and maybe were about to cry, then miraculously someone found their lunch.
What would you eat for lunch? Like I'm like, in my head, I'm picturing like coal miners with like hand pies and overall pockets.
Yeah, well, it was handmade sandwiches.
Yeah.
As much as you could fit in. I'm sure I had like a lunch pail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it had a thermos bottle in it, so I could have something coldish with my lunch. But you can only put stuff in that wasn't going to spoil during the heat of the day because they didn't have refrigerators to put it in.
Yeah.
So it was sitting in the lunch pail waiting for the break. If you had lettuce on your sandwich, that was pretty wilted by then. And you could, eat cookies and stuff, whatever, to fill you up, to get you through the hours in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then by the time we finished work, we all were gathered around near the barns trying to get out of the sun in the shade a little bit, waiting for the buses to arrive. I don't know where they kept them. I think they probably were in the school bus barns.
Yeah.
And only came back when they were at the time when they're supposed to get us and bring us home. Yeah. So that was another chance for pranks or fooling around or mischief and stuff like that.
All right. That's funny. All right. Do you remember how much you got paid and what did you do with your earnings?
This is going to sound amazing. And I had forgotten about this, and just getting ready for this interview, I was looking at those questions and I knew what my hourly rate was, but I had to do the math to figure out what my gross salary was for the week. We were getting paid, field hands, working in these fields under these conditions, 35 cents an hour for 40 hours a week before any taxes were withheld. We were grossing a robust $14 a week.
You know what? I will just say for the record that your grandson, Bob, who was only 10 and a half, but if he had $14 a week, it would be like, he'd feel like a king if he had that.
Yeah, and that's the way we were, because we never earned any money at all. We didn't know if it was a lot. We were all earning the same thing.
Yeah.
And the girls who were working in the barns were probably getting about the same hourly wage. But looking at it now, quite a few years later, say, how the heck did we ever put up with those conditions for that wage? But nobody was making a lot of money. If you were working in a factory, you might be making $1.50 an hour.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that many years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And what'd you do with your, were you a saver? Did you blow it all at the cinema?
So I couldn't drive. At only 14, I didn't have a car yet.
Yep.
So I could only go where my bicycle or my legs would take me. And I'm sure I was encouraged at home to open a savings account.
Mm-hmm.
And this would have been like Easthampton Savings Bank, where, you know, my grandmother, my parents, everybody had their account. It wasn't even a checking account. So if you wanted to put money in or get money out, you had to actually go to the building where the bank was and slip it through the slot to the tellers, and you'd get a receipt for it. And you had to remember where you put it, so you had some idea of how much you had in the bank. Now, that following fall, when I was in high school, I had a little bit of spending cash from working there. So there was a little coffee sandwich shop across the street from Easthampton High School at the time. So we could go over there after school, get a Coke, put a few nickels in the jukebox. That's where La Bamba was first heard. Yeah. It was kind of fun.
And did you have, I mean, was it like, like a crew? Were those your friends that you kind of hung out with, or were those like friends from the neighborhood that worked with you?
Yeah, there was some from the neighborhood. But again, I think the recruiting went on at all three of the parochial schools in Easthampton. But they all came to the same, it was all the same General Cigar. So they all showed up at the same fields, and we made friends that way. And those same friends were going to high school the following year.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were long-term friendships that were made. And of course, in high school, some of us went out for sports. Mm-hmm. And I tried out for the soccer team at Easthampton High School and made it even as a freshman. And amazingly, in our roster of schools to play was Smith Academy in Hatfield. So right back there for a whole different thing. Probably there were kids there that worked in the tobacco field.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's see. Are there any days or memories that stand out from that whole summer?
I think some of the excitement happened because summertime in Massachusetts, you're going to get thunderstorms. Mm-hmm. And those were some of the few times we got to get out of the field, and into whatever shelter was available. So we didn't have to worry about lightning hitting some of the posts that held up the netting that was on there. But by and large, I don't think, other than that, it was pretty routine, pretty mundane.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't been for one fact, I might have even considered going back for a second summer there. Because again, if you're not 16, you can't do any other kind of work.
Right.
Drive or anything like that. But late that summer, one of my uncles bought a very large house in Easthampton on a different part of town from where I was living at the time that I went to work on tobacco farms in Hatfield. And so we moved. It was a two-story duplex house, very large, with about 5 acres of land. So my family moved to the second floor of this large house, and my job became doing the kind of chores required to do the upkeep for this yard and the house. I mean, there was a 5-car garage as part of this property, a big lawn, and I think somewhere in your Facebook pictures, you have a picture of me standing on a hill next to what was a terraced crabapple orchard on that property. So I had to mow the grass. I had to get rid of all the apples when they fell in the fall. We had a chicken coop. I had to clean that. Maybe one of the worst jobs in all the world.
Cleaning a chicken coop.
But I couldn't make it back to work on the tobacco fields anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I had an allowance for doing the kinds of jobs that were there. There was a white picket fence that went around this house. Must have been half a mile long. And one summer I got to paint the whole darn thing.
You had your Tom Sawyer moment there.
Yeah. But tobacco, that was such an adventure for a 14-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And the straw bosses there were older kids. They were kids who'd been on tobacco, maybe from Hatfield work. They were now 16 or older, and weren't always the kindest straw bosses you could have. So there was a little bit of friction there sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow we managed to avoid any punches or other kinds of physical activity together.
Would you say that was, would you, if you had to go back and do it again, would you rather work for your family or work for the General Cigar and have a 16 boss?
This was with your friends too, kids from the neighborhood. So it was like a first adventure for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe having gotten through the first summer, we might have changed our minds.
Yeah.
But for that first adventure, I think we all look forward to it. And it really was quite an adventure before it became an ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
And $14 was $14 to a 14, 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Big money.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think was the best part about that summer working tobacco?
I think it was knowing that you could do it.
Mm-hmm.
This very hard work under extreme weather conditions. And I think knowing you could do that was like a newfound level of confidence that wound up bringing to other things that I did after that. It might seem bad, but you could figure out how to do it. You could figure out how to do it easier and better.
Mm-hmm. And
that was a valuable lesson that helped me to know how to apply that to future endeavors.
So what was the training for this job? I mean, did somebody show you like one time, whap, whap, now you go and do it?
You want to be a picker, kid? You want to be a hauler? Well, what do pickers do? Well, they're in the fields picking the leaves off the plants all the time, going up and down the road. What does a hauler do? Well, the leaves got to get out of the field somehow. So the hauler goes in with these baskets up and down. And then when it's full, you come out of the fields to take it out. I said, oh, coming out every now and then to see other people and get a drink of water, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to be a hauler. Well, at the time, 14 years old, I was probably about 5'6".
Yeah.
Maybe weighed 130 pounds. But I knew for my size, I was pretty strong. And I could handle those baskets of tobacco. I could, with someone on the other end, we could haul those up onto the flatbed trucks and going in. So there was a good bit of confidence that came just from that
Yeah.
and being able to do that. Yeah.
Do you have like sense memory of anything besides being sticky? I mean, around town, especially this time of year, like they're starting to open the slats of all the barns, and you
Yeah.
know, where we live, the garage is a tobacco barn. So
Yeah.
even now when it gets really humid, you get that smell still
Yeah.
from the wood.
Yeah.
I know they don't have it, you know, in Florida where you are, but do you have sense memories of that other than being sticky?
I probably did at the time, and I know it was always on you because of the juice that got on your clothes and on your skin. Uh, but and we recognized it as soon as we got back in, and I think it was always there in our clothes
Yeah.
because it would never wash out completely.
Yeah.
Uh, Fortunately, that went away over time.
Yeah.
I imagine if I came to visit you in Hatfield and went in that barn, I would recognize that smell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's, I mean, that you can't throw a rock around here without
yeah.
hitting a tobacco barn. Yeah. Have you ever smoked a cigar?
I tried, just like freshman year in high school, a lot of kids were smoking cigarettes,
Yeah.
uh, and I tried it. I didn't like the taste at all.
Yeah.
But because I had made the soccer team, I had an excuse. No, I don't want a cigarette because if coach ever finds out I'm smoking, he'd kick me off the team. So no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. And where'd the product end up? Was that something you could buy around here, or was it
No, I went somewhere else. And I said at the beginning, I don't know where the three types of tobacco used to make a cigar eventually wound up. They all had to be in the same place because you need all three kinds to roll a cigar. And I don't know where that took place. It might not have even been in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, and maybe the lady at the historical museum has some idea of where General Cigar made their cigars.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew what brands they were, and you could buy it any place that you could buy cigarettes and cigars anywhere in the area, but I just don't know where it was made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never did become a smoker,
Yeah.
and it just that decision freshman year in high school was a good decision. I'm glad I stayed with it.
Yeah. Now, was this your choice? Like you said that the buses came around to the neighborhoods where like the parochial schools were your parents telling you like you gotta get a job? Or was it like you wanted a job?
No, I wanted it. And the buses didn't come around to the parochial school. I guess that's where they came to recruit kids.
Okay.
So they probably had meetings in the school. I don't actually remember signing up, but that was where they got your name, your address, and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the buses would actually come around like a school bus. It would come around to the neighborhood
Yeah.
and pick up the kids who lived in that neighborhood and go on to a next neighborhood until they had everybody that was on their pickup list.
Yeah.
And then they'd head from Easthampton to Hatfield.
So you'd get on the bus, work an 8-hour day. That ends up being, 9 hours.
Easily, because it was at least a half-hour bus ride
Yeah.
right out to Hatfield from Easthampton. Yeah, long day.
Yeah.
I think we were probably picked up about 7 in the morning, maybe 7:30.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's, the question here is, would you recommend this to young people today? And just thinking of my own children, they'd be like, no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
It'd be interesting to find out if I can't imagine there's any other way to pick shade tobacco except leaf
In my
by
hands.
leaf.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got to be more than 35 cents an hour these days. So maybe that's work that's worth doing.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to do anything else yet, that could be a summer job, and maybe you get not $14 a week, maybe 14, no, it wouldn't be $14 an hour. Right?
Well, it's just, there's so many farms and, we see the tobacco growing around here.
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to maybe check that out someday in the not too distant future.
Yeah. Find that picture of me that you have,
Yeah, I will.
and include that so anyone who watches this interview will get an idea of what I think it was maybe 15 or 16 in that picture, but close enough to look like the kid who was working tobacco, or
Yeah.
pretty close to it afterwards. Yeah.
Great. Anything else that you wanted to say? I think I went through everything.
It certainly was a character building experience.
I'm sure.
And a confidence building experience. But I think if I had choices today, I would probably pick something that wasn't as messy.
Less physical.
But it's part of a personal history.
Yeah, for sure.
And part of what went on in Hatfield. And happy to share my own experience with it, with this historical society project. So thank you for facilitating this.
Yeah. I mean, we know so little about Grandpa when he was a young man, so this is cool to have this information.
Yep.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you, dear.
All right.
See you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.